This game is called Legend of Zelda Dungeon of Infinity, and I'm blurring the footage here on screen because there's a certain Japanese gaming company, you know the one, with lots and lots of lawyers, and they don't want you to be watching this video because it paints them in a bad light. They want to control any conversations that happen about them and their intellectual property. So I'm trying to make sure that they can't take this down like they did to my friend Russ over at Retro Game Core. But let's talk about Dungeon of Infinity. First, I want to talk about the game itself, and then we'll talk about legal nonsense later on. It's a fan game. Essentially what they did is they made a procedurally generated roguelike dungeon crawler using art and audio assets from A Link to the Past. You play as Link or other characters from A Link to the Past, and you pick your starting loadout. Then you head into the dungeon and you work your way down through the levels. Every time you die, you start over, and the dungeon layout, items, enemies are all randomly generated, so each run is unique, which means the game has massive replay value. The game was released by Justin Boehmer, and it took him 4 years to make it. It runs on Windows, but getting it to run on Steam Deck or Bazite or any other Linux distro is trivially easy, and I'll show you how to do that later on in the video. I'm super early in the game, and the farthest that I've made it so far is level 3. Though at the start, you do get to pick items to help you, like a shield or an extra heart or apples. And the first time that I played through, I didn't pick anything because I just wanted to see how the game played. And then every time I died, I would just hit new game and it would go again, at which point I forgot about the extra items that you get to start with. So my current run, I'm on level 3 again, and I have a bunch of apples which can heal you. I'm thinking I could probably make it further this time now that I have, some health options. At certain points, you can hit save houses, so, you can save your progress, but I'm currently playing on Bazite on my ROG Ally-X, and it has the same exact sleep and wake features that are awesome on SteamOS, so I can stop playing whenever I want and come back to it. As you progress through the dungeon, you're picking up all kinds of stuff, and it fills up your inventory really fast, which means you're going to have to make decisions about what you want to take with you and what you want to leave behind. So for instance, I found a shirt that gave me +2 to defense, but I couldn't carry it without dropping my wand that turned enemies into live bombs. Yes, that's an item in the game. I'm hoping that you can upgrade your inventory as you get deeper into the dungeon because my bags were full after the second floor and I had to leave lots of stuff behind. You can find like these, I'm not even sure what they are yet, but they're like parts of an item and you can put them together, but they come in different colors. And so if you keep the blue one and then you find the other half of the green one later on, you can't match them up. So there's a lot of making those kinds of decisions when dealing with inventory management on your way through the 13 levels. Bill, you ask, this game sounds fantastic. Where can I download it? To which I would reply,
that's a good question.
Now that you've got your files downloaded, if you want to run this game on your Steam Deck or Bazite or other Linux distros, it's really, really easy. Simply boot into desktop mode and download the game. Unzip the files and then right-click the exe file and click Add to Steam. If you're on Bazite, that menu doesn't actually have Add to Steam in the right-click menu, so what you'll have to do instead is start Steam on the bottom left, click on Add Non-Steam Game. Once you've got that done, boot into game mode and then find the game in your non-Steam games library. Instead of pressing play, use the cog wheel on the right-hand side, then go down to Properties, then Compatibility, and click Force Use of Specific Steam Play Compatibility Tool and select Proton Experimental. After that, the game should launch without any issues. Now, let's talk about legal nonsense when it comes to fan games. Now, first off, I'm not a lawyer, and nothing that I'm saying here should ever be taken as legal advice. If I get some of the legal stuff wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments down below that like button. But I don't really care so much about the legality of this. I care more about the morality of it. I like to think of fan games as an artist painting a picture of their favorite characters from movies or TV. Is it legal to paint it? Yes, it is. Is it legal to sell that painting? Not without licenses. Is it legal to paint it and then put it in a place where everyone can see it if they want to for free? I don't see why not, which is exactly what Dungeon to Infinity is doing. They've made this game, and yes, they did use sprite work and music from the original game, but they aren't charging anyone money. As far as I know, they don't even accept money for it. It's absolutely a legal gray area, but legal gray areas have never stopped Nintendo's ninjas from attacking the little guy. They know that defending yourself in court is very expensive, and they have deep, deep pockets. So they can just threaten most with a lawsuit, and most will fold because only the super rich people and corporations have the resources to go up against a company like Nintendo's ninjas. So what happens just about every time Nintendo's lawyers get involved is the person or company getting sued backs off real fast, meaning that they get to win without ever actually having their case tested by a jury. They used the legal system as a weapon because that's what rich people and rich corporations get to do. A few months back, I talked about a game that was a fan remake of Link's Awakening. You could see the whole island at once, everything was moving around, the camera was adjustable, and it followed you instead of moving from screen to screen. The game is really cool, and in that video, I said what I always say. This is going to get taken down, so find it while you can, because Nintendo's ninjas are going to strike, and little guys like the devs cannot be expected to stand up to giant corporations. Now, to be fair to both sides on this argument, if you have somebody breaking your copyright, as a copyright holder, you are legally obligated to defend that copyright, or you risk the consequence of losing your copyrights. Using music and sprite work in your fan game is, well, okay, again, not a lawyer, but it is breaking copyright. So Nintendo are legally right to go after this. They were legally right to go after the Link's Awakening remake. And I'd expect this to vanish maybe before I actually get this video posted. If that happens, hopefully places like the Internet Archive can find a way to preserve it. But that's what happens when the ninjas come after somebody that can't fight back. What if they come after someone that has corporate backings? That changes things, which brings me to the second story today, and that's the ninjas are suing Pocket Pair, the creators of Pal World. Now, if you don't know what Pal World is, it's a game where you go after monsters with guns, you weaken them through combat, and then when they're weak enough, you can throw a ball at them to catch them. Sound familiar? There's more to it than that because the game also has base building mechanics. You can play online with your friends, but it is essentially Pokemon with guns, and that's what everybody always calls it. Then, when the game was first released, it was incredibly popular because the gameplay mechanics behind Pokemon are actually pretty fun, but the Pokemon Company has done very little to push their games forward over the past few years. And with the exception of Pokemon Legends Arceus, I personally feel like they just keep releasing the same poorly optimized slop, and people keep buying it over and over and over. When Pal World released, everyone, myself included, said this is not going to last long. And honestly, if you look at the character designs in Pal World, there are some very significant similarities to Pokemon monsters. Now, if Nintendo had gone after Pal World because the designs of the monsters in Pal World resembled the designs of the monsters in Pokemon too closely, I think almost everyone would say, well, okay, that's justified. But that's not what they're doing here. And my guess is that Nintendo's highly paid army of lawyers couldn't make that argument. I'm sure that their lawyers looked at the models and got experts to look at the models, and they determined, okay, I guess that they didn't rip us off, or I don't see how we can prove that they ripped us off. So how else can we go after this company? Well, we could use patents that we have that are there to protect our gameplay inventions. And that's what Nintendo are doing here with Pocket Pair. They're suing Pocket Pair for patent infringement. So copyright is what protects art, and patents protect inventions. We currently don't know exactly which patents Nintendo is saying that Pocket Pair violated, but there are some that would argue that it's because Nintendo has a patent for throwing a ball to catch an on-screen character, which is one hell of an invention. Here's the problem. That patent is way too broad, and it never should have been awarded. They're going after Pocket Pair for this, but I don't think that this would happen if a bigger company were doing it. You might look at the lawsuit and say, I don't play Pal World, I don't play Pokemon, why should I care about this? Well, because companies like Nintendo have tons of overly broad patents, and they can enforce those. Have you ever played a game and had your character walk behind a tree or some other kind of geometry in the game, and you shouldn't be able to see your character, but you can see their silhouette? Nintendo owns a patent on that. Some might look at that patent and say, well, that's used in so many games, it shouldn't really be patentable, which is a defense to patent law. You know, that should be battled out in court. But here's the thing. These lawsuits almost never make it to court. They usually end up getting settled with whoever brought the lawsuit getting licensing fees from the defendant because litigation never happened. The lawsuit isn't ever actually tested in court, and I'll bet that is what Nintendo is banking on. Of course, there are people that would say Nintendo would not bring this lawsuit if they didn't think that they could win, and I agree with that. But they probably won't have to win because I'm betting that, you know, Pocket Pair has said they're going to fight this, but I'm sure at some point in the near future, well, it doesn't even have to be the near future because this stuff takes a long time to metal out. At some point in the future, the two parties are going to settle. Overly broad patents are one of the biggest blockers to innovation. Sega sued the developers of Simpsons Road Rage over the arrow on screen that showed you where to go. Sega patented that after making Crazy Taxi, an arrow showing you where to go. They ended up settling out of court. If Nintendo is suing this smaller company over throwing a ball at a character to catch them, if they're suing over that patent, then why didn't Nintendo sue Activision Blizzard when Blizzard essentially built a Pokemon game into World of Warcraft? Yes, you can basically play Pokemon in World of Warcraft. You go throughout the world, you find enemies to fight, you fight them with the monsters that you've collected, and then when you get them low enough, you don't throw a ball, you throw a box, and then the box lands on the monster and you have a chance of catching it. Why wouldn't they sue World of Warcraft? I think I know why. Because Blizzard has deep pockets, and it isn't quite so easy to bully them into a settlement. Let's look at how ridiculous patent law in video games can be. Back in the 80s, the game The Black Onyx, which is a game made by Bulletproof Software, they represented hit points on screen as a life bar. It's been pretty much every game after that, right? If they had patented that mechanic, which honestly is not that far off from throwing an object at a monster and catching it, if they had patented that mechanic, then they could sue just about every video game creator after that, including Nintendo, because guess what? Link has hearts for a life bar, which is essentially the same thing. So, okay, I guess we'll have to use numbers to represent health instead of a life bar in games, right? Well, that isn't going to work either, because in 1980, Rogue used numbers for hit points in the game. So I guess we can't have games that have health bars, and we can't have games that have numbers either. You get my point. Shifting to a more modern example, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor had what is called the Nemesis system, which allowed players to develop rivalries in the game with enemies that evolved and adapted over time. Guess what? That system was very cool, and it was also patented by Warner Brothers, and we pretty much never saw it again because Warner Brothers sucks. My point is that these giant corporations don't need to win in court in order to win. They just have to threaten it, and most of the time the offenders will give up because they don't want Nintendo to own their house. When my friend Russ got hit with a copyright strike on his channel over at Retro Game Core, make sure that you subscribe to him, by the way, for having the audacity to talk about making legal backups of his games that he bought, but because he had a couple of seconds of a title screen of a Mario game in his video, what did he do when Nintendo came after him? He threw up his hands and said, well, you win, Nintendo. Why? Because the deck is stacked in Nintendo's favor. They have an army of lawyers, and Russ is just some guy. The court system, when it comes to copyrights, when it comes to patents, and when it comes to stuff like this, is broken in favor of giant corporations. And while I don't think that there's anything that we can do about it, I do think that we should cause a ruckus when these companies overstep. And I don't know if there's ever going to be a situation in which this kind of stuff goes away, but the only way that will happen is for one of these companies to sue the little guy and the little guy to fight back and win. Unfortunately, fighting back and winning is really hard to do. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everyone.